What's going on, everybody? We are back with another episode of The Jungle Project Rebuild. As a lot of you guys know, in season 4, I'm talking to just a lot of different people. I'm getting people that may or may not have been throughout the criminal justice system, but people that have really great stories, really great, amazing comeback stories, people that have made great lives for themselves. So with me today, I have a good friend of mine. Her name is Annique Lesage. Annique, I'm going to let her tell her own story, but Annique is currently the proud and successful owner of Small World uh, Ventures, I believe it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Small World Ventures. She is a freight broker. She is a yogi. She corrals one of my best friends, who is an idiot at times. I hope he's sitting there listening to this.
No.
Um, but I've gotten a chance to hang out with Annique. Annique is a great person. She has a great comeback story. So without further ado, guys, this is Annique. Annique, say hi to everybody.
Hey guys, what's up? Thanks for having me.
um, no, I'm really glad you decided to do this because I remember being on the phone with Andrew, talking to him and saying, he was like, "Oh, Annique would probably do that," and I was like, "Well, like I wasn't comfortable because you started training me to like broker freight and stuff like that, and I was like, I don't want to like ask the wrong questions or like come off like." So I was always hesitant to ask you, but I'm super glad that you decided to do it. This is cool. So Andrew and I have talked quite a bit about you. You and I haven't necessarily talked a whole lot about your past, which is fine. We're going to do that today. Um, so why don't you, just to start off, let everybody know, like, who is Annique? Where are you from? Like, what was your childhood like?
Well, I was born in Jersey. My dad came to America in the 70s to be a rock star, and he actually did really well for a while. He mostly transitioned into sound engineering, so there were some pretty big names in and out of my house, and he's credited on some albums. I won't go too much into that, but he met my mom at CBGB, and magic happened, and here I am. So I grew up in Jersey. He adopted my older sister that my mom, had before him, and I have another brother. But probably around 14, they separated and got divorced. And my mom eventually remarried my stepfather, and he brought 2 step siblings, and we all, grew up from that point forward as one big happy. My real dad lives down here in Florida, about 4 hours away from me. See him sporadically, but mostly that's the family that I grew up with and remember.
Okay.
So,
And what was it like growing up in? So you were in the music scene then, kind of, or your dad was. What was it
yeah.
like growing up with a dad that was kind of like important, famous?
Well, there were several components to it. So I grew up in kind of a xenophobic area. So here's my dad with like this accent,
Oh
this
yeah.
foreign accent, and I kind of adopted a little bit of it sometimes in certain words. And also I grew up learning how to speak through music. Like he would sit me on his lap and he would learn how to speak English that way. And I was learning how to speak like kind of at the same time. So we used a lot of really big words. I grew up being told that, I speak way more advanced than I should at my age, and also a little bit more poetically. It's because I learned how to speak through song lyrics, basically. But there were some pretty interesting names coming in and out of the house. Different concerts at really young ages, and eventually, when I was about 8 or 9, my mom was like, "Listen, kibosh on the music industry, get a real job." And so my dad kind of gave it up and started working for the DoD.
Oh, so okay, so he's got a Department of Defense background too.
A little bit, yeah. He was a
Okay.
contractor for, a lot of the, I don't want to, it's not weaponry, but components for the helicopters and aircrafts and things like that. So he
Okay.
took his engineering and moved it over to that sector.
Okay. Okay. So you're living in Jersey. What? So you went to, I believe it's University of Georgia,
I went to Georgia State.
Georgia State. Okay.
Mhm.
So what was your degree in? Did you graduate?
Yeah, I graduated with a degree in biology.
Okay. Cool. Um, So coming out of Georgia, you began working where?
So before I went to Georgia, I graduated high school and I moved to France for a good year to be with my family over there. And it was super expensive. I ran out of money. I actually wanted to go to college there, but foreign students there are just as expensive as foreign students here. So I just decided I was going to come back, get my college degree, and then hightail it right back to France. And that just didn't happen. But once I graduated from Georgia, I moved back up to Jersey and I started working in New York. I had a regular job in New York for as a corporate restaurant group, a big name. I don't know if they would appreciate me saying their name, but I worked there and I also bartended on the weekends in New Jersey. So I would commute on the train back and forth. Never used the biology degree, not once in my life. Like once that was done, I was like, I'm done. And I left it. I actually wanted to be a veterinarian and I couldn't afford to go to vet school, but I got into some, really great schools. I just couldn't afford it. So, backup plan. I just started working in offices and little by little, it introduced me to the freight and shipping industry. It was kind of a slow burn into that. So I was doing everything except for actually shipping. I was dealing with customs. I was dealing with inventory. I was dealing with all of that stuff. So it was definitely priming me for what I'm doing now.
Okay. And so during that time, then you, at what point did you start? You've got like a funny story, and I don't really want to go into it as far
Uh-huh.
as me explaining it. So why don't as far as your charges and everything went, because it stemmed from you learning how to not necessarily broker freight, but it was a bookkeeping job, correct? It was this
Right.
job.
No. So eventually, that was my job in New York. I met, I don't want to say I met, I reacquainted and reconnected with somebody that I was really close with in high school. We started dating and we got married. That was my first marriage. It was more of like a notarized friendship, but it brought me to Florida. And when he and I started going through our divorce, I took this job, and it was a foreign company. They were based out of Italy, and they had satellite offices all over the world. So in every continent, every country, they had an office because they would sell these huge stone cutting machines that are probably as big as your sun porch or twice the size of this room. And they were millions of dollars each. So they would sell from Italy to all of these other countries. And it was the offices in those countries that had to collect on those contracts, collect that
Yeah.
money, wire it to Italy, and also provide spare parts and provide service technicians to their machines. In America, that is kind of touchy because if they do something like that, and they say, hey, only our service technicians are allowed to touch your machine, or only our spare parts are allowed to go into your machine, or else your whole warranty is negated and you're screwed, then that's considered a foreign monopoly. And, America doesn't like that. So
Yeah.
over the course of a few years, that was going on. And finally, one, one company yelled about it and made a fuss, and it caused a lot of red flags to go up. And that was just kind of a domino effect. And I was the controller of the company. I was the manager of the whole thing. But everybody else that worked in that company was from Italy or the Netherlands. So one day I show up for work after being on vacation for 2 weeks and nobody's there. It was March 31st. It was March 31st, 2008. And I show up for work. Nobody's there. Most of the inventory is gone. My computer and my office are totally fine. And I'm like, these dumbasses are trying to play an April Fool's joke a day early. I thought that they were just like messing up because they were stupid. But, other than that, we were all very close. Like we spent holidays together. I didn't have any family down here. I didn't have a whole ton of friends because I was going through a divorce and everything. And I'm still relatively new to Florida. So these people that I spent 8+ hours with every day really became my family by proxy. And we spent so much time together. So I'm not thinking that anybody is like leaving me with the bag. I
Yeah,
trusted.
you're
So
oblivious at that point to what's going on.
completely. So I'm there. I'm thinking that like they're just running late or whatever, or they're just trying to play a joke. And then all of a sudden there's a knock on the door. I open it up and there's a detective and a police officer. And they're like, we have some questions to ask you regarding X, Y, and Z. And so they sat down in front of me and they showed me, their load. And I was like, I've watched enough Law and Order to know I need a attorney.
Yeah.
So um, so they arrested me right away, and they were like, well, if you're not going to cooperate, then we're going to have to arrest you. And I'm like, judging by the size of that pile of paper, I'm pretty sure you were going to do that anyway.
Yeah.
So I was arrested. I was brought to jail in Florida. Your first appearance is the next morning. No, the following afternoon, unless it's the weekend, and then they try to get you out in the morning because the judges need to go golfing, and they have tea time. So
Yeah.
as lawyers too. So I'm sitting there and I'm waiting, and you talk to other people that are in the holding cells with you, and you're like, what's going to happen? I've never been arrested before in my life. I had a totally normal upbringing. And if anybody else in my family had ever been arrested or put in jail, nobody talked about it. I don't know what to expect. So I'm talking to these people and I'm like, what, this is what I'm charged with. What do you think my bail is going to be? What's going to happen? And
And
everybody's
all the
giving
jailhouse attorneys came to your
right, all of
aid,
them. Yep.
giving you all the bad advice.
Your bail is just going to be like $1,000, just $100. Go to a bondsman, tell your people. And I was with somebody. I had a boyfriend, so I'm calling him, and I'm like, just go to any bail bondsman and tell him to look up my charges and give him $100, and they'll bail me out. So I call him back after a few hours, and I'm like, why have you not done this? Are you dropping me? Like, are you not sticking by me through this? And he was like, yeah, I went to the bail bondsman and they were like, her bail's $1 million. And he looked at them and he was like, I don't have $1 million. Like, he was really, none of us had ever dealt with this before. And I'm like, $1 million.
It wasn't like there wasn't a 10%. I mean, that's still a big chunk of change.
Yeah, that would be $100,000. But yeah, no, they could do a surety, but that's a lot. And nobody knows or what to expect or why or what's going on. And so other people in the holding cell are like, $1 million, what'd you do? And I, of course I'm being told, don't talk to anybody, all this stuff. And I'm like, nothing, but they dubbed me $1 million baby. that was my jailhouse nickname. So,
well, I'm sure there wasn't too many. I mean, if you're not walking around talking about your charges, but everybody knows you've got $1 million bond, people are looking at you all kinds of fucking sideways. They're like,
you murder? Somebody check on the mayor, see if he's alive.
right.
So I go to first appearance, and basically they're like, she has family in France. I did have plane tickets to go to France and visit my family there months ahead, round trip, And so they were like, she's got ties in other countries. She doesn't have a whole lot of ties, in the community. So,
so they thought you were just a flight risk straight out of the gate.
Right. So I hired an attorney real fast, like the day of, and he came and, he represented me, but he was like, we're just going to wait for discovery and see what they have. And then we'll ask for a bond reduction and then we'll take it from there. So I sat for a while. I sat for like 9 months, and I was getting really angry because in that time I didn't get any discovery, and you're supposed to get it within like 30 days. Like, I need to see what you have specifically on me to warrant you keeping me here and away from my life. So finally we had some kind of status conference 9 months later, and I still didn't have discovery. And the judge asked about it, and my attorney poo-pooed it, like, oh, we're being flexible with the state. He thought that if we were, kind of lenient with them, then they would be lenient on me. And I'm like, I didn't do anything to be lenient on. So he said that, and I just spoke up on my behalf, and I was like, Your Honor, I want to know why I'm here. I want to know what they have specifically on me, because I don't know. I haven't been able to look through anything, and I deserve this. And if they can't give it to me, then give me a bond. And so he looked at the state and he was like, will you be able to give them discovery within the next week? And they said, no, we won't have it available in a week. And so the judge was like, okay, you're going to have a bond. You have to turn over your passport, all of that stuff. Like I had some requirements. And I said, fine. So my boyfriend at the time broke into my own house and got my passport, brought it to the clerk of court, and my family paid the 15 grand to get me out. And then I was out and I was fighting this. So
Now, these were state charges, right? These weren't federal charges. And how?
they initially wanted it to be federal, and I wanted it to be federal because all of the all of the jailhouse attorneys are like, oh, feds are a cake, you know, you get less time in feds, all this stuff.
It depends
so
on where, yeah.
So I go to my attorney and I'm like, you know, keep it federal. He's like, I'm trying to keep it from being federal. I'm like, why would you do that? And he was like, the United States of America versus Annique Lesage is not what you want. It's not the great thing that you think it is. It's bad enough the state. Let's just have the state of Florida have a beef with you, not the entire United States of America. So it was supposed to be, but then they lowered it. He fought for that. Like that was one good thing that he did, is he lowered a lot of the charges. But you know, Go ahead.
I was just saying, you know, it's funny because you brought it up a couple of times, all the jailhouse attorneys, man. And I used to fucking hate listening to people. And I would be like, first of all, I would never take the advice. And I get it. Like the first time that I got locked up, I was new to it as well. Like I had done like 1-2 nights in the county or like in the drunk tank or whatever.
Right.
This was the first time I sat for months. And I think I was only locked up, I think, 4 months. That was start to finish, but they had a pretty solid case against Mr. Tackett. But I used to get so fucking irritated listening to these guys because one guy's at the table and he's like, you're going to get stroked. You're getting like 10 years, bro. And the other guy's like, oh, you're going home on a PR bond today. I'm like, would you guys just shut the fuck up and stay in your own fucking lane?
Mm-hmm.
So you finally, at what point did they give you your motion to discover?
They gave me my discovery a month after I bonded out, and it was voluminous. It was about like that big. It couldn't fit in one bag that they like to give you. But I mean, their discovery was just triplicate copies of the same thing over and over again. So it made it look a lot worse than it was. And they were like, you did this check, blah, 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 you did this. And I'm like, everything was authorized. So once they got discovery and they were like, you initiated these wire transfers, you did all of this. And I'm like, that was part of the job, you know, like that was my job description.
So where is your company at in all this? Like when all this is going on, have you had zero contact with the company you were working for? Did they just ghost you?
Everybody. So the one guy, Genrico, went to Cuba, and it turns out that he had cancer, and he was going to Cuba to get treatment because he doesn't trust American healthcare. Can't blame him.
Well, I can't blame him there.
Magdalena went back to the Netherlands, and then everybody else went back to Italy. And then when the smoke settled, or the dust settled, they came back. And now the company is still there and thriving. They've just changed the way that they're doing business. So initially they had a problem with the entire amount of wires and the entire amount of money that went out. And then somebody from the company in Italy spoke up and was like, this is us. This was our fault. That's what she was supposed to do. And they were like, well, we have a problem then with the fact that to get down to it, they would collect the money for all of these machines. And then the American company, we would deduct all of our operating expenses from that amount and then send the wire over to Italy, which is essentially money laundering. And it's also lowering an amount of money that's going to a foreign country. And so therefore less money for that country to have to pay taxes on in the US. Okay. So that turned into the problem. First, it was the amount of money that was being laundered. And then he was like, it's totally legit. Showed contracts, cool. And then they were like, yeah, but you avoided taxes on this chunk of money that they retained. So the guy over in Italy, Dario Toncelli, he wrote like a statement, and he was like, this is the way that it was always done. It was in place before she started working there. So we can't really blame her for that. We take the responsibility for that. Cool. Great. So then he went and he paid the taxes on the difference. So he did that. That's what they did for me and that letter. Then Dario dies. He dies like 5 or 6 months after I get bonded out. And his son takes over the company, and he was like, we did what we were supposed to do. We're moving on from this. Sorry. Have fun. So the least they could have done was paid for my attorney. I paid probably start to finish about 100 in legal defense.
Yeah.
So that was that, but that was helpful. And then that's how it kind of turned into a state case versus a federal case, because now they were focusing on the wire fees and all of that stuff just in the county that I was working out of, which was Sarasota. So that being said, that's where the state charges came in, and that's where the restitution amount finally landed on. After I was bonded out, that really pissed the state off. And they were like, hey, so by the way, there were times that she worked from home, and she lives in Manatee County, but she worked in Sarasota County. So if she's working from home and she's doing this in Manatee County, we can charge her in Manatee County, which is what they did. So that turned into a whole double jeopardy defense for Manatee County, but it revoked my bond. So I went back to jail, and now I'm pregnant with my boyfriend, like my boyfriend at the time, like who eventually became my husband. I'm pregnant, and my bond is revoked, and I'm sitting in jail, and I don't have a bond because apparently there's a crime that was committed while I was out on bail, which is not the case. So I had to have my son Eli while I was in jail. And it's weird. It's funny because there's a girl that is on another podcast similar to this one, Ian Bick. And I was in I was in the prison with her, and she's sitting there talking about giving birth while incarcerated and how she's shackled to the bed. Girl's a friggin' liar. I was there with her on that prison yard. I saw how she operated, and she's like, I was shackled. They don't shackle you. They can't shackle you when you're giving birth. You get, like, when you're done, you have like an ankle shackle to the bed, but while you're giving birth, you're going to be writhing. You're going to be in pain. You got to move around.
I was going to say there's no, my believe it or not, my ex-wife actually gave birth in not prison. It was, I don't think it was prison. It was county. But yeah, she said they don't shackle you. It's that's
legally,
wild though.
They're not
I
allowed
couldn't
to.
imagine. So okay, so while you were pregnant in jail, we'll come back to the rest of your charges real quick, but just real briefly, while you were pregnant in jail, what was that like? Like, what was? I mean, did the other inmates kind of like look out for you, or
my bond? I was 36 weeks. So
okay.
By a certain time of your pregnancy, like whatever trimester you're in, they won't allow you in general population because they have to monitor you really closely. Yeah. But otherwise, if I was earlier in my trimesters, I would be in general population, and all they would do is like give you a snack and a carton of milk. That's it. And prenatal vitamins. That's it. The jail itself at the time was like no windows at all. You're in a pod with about, I think, like 12 cells, 2 per cell. And like they called it the Blue Lagoon because everything was painted blue. And it was dirty. There was roaches everywhere. Like, you were responsible for cleaning the place. And, you know, some days there's people who are, 3 days deep into detoxing and they don't want to clean, and God bless them. But, that's, if you want to live in a clean environment, then you got to be the one to do it. But their caustics are toxic. So a pregnant person can't do that. So luckily, I did not have to experience that part. I came in 36 weeks pregnant, and they put me in the medical wing with the other pregnant girls that were that far along. And some of them were having to go every single day to, I forget the name of it, but it's the methadone clinic. But they had to go because they were detoxing off of heroin. And if they detox off of heroin while they're pregnant, there's a really, really high chance that that baby's going to die and you're going to miscarry.
Yeah.
So they would go and get the methadone every day, which
So let's give them fucking methadone while you're pregnant too.
I mean, I understand. Yeah, it's
I
disgusting,
it's just
but
or how about we just don't use fucking drugs while we're pregnant? Like that's
right.
I mean,
But
come on. That
that
was a fuck.
already left the barn. You know, at this point
Yeah,
now,
I
okay,
know.
we can save that baby. That baby ain't staying with that
I
girl.
know.
You know, once it's
Right.
born. But for now, let's keep the baby alive. But it really pissed me off because they devoted all of the transport resources to those girls that needed to go to the methadone clinic, and that left me without any transport to my doctor's appointments because they are not bringing doctors into the jail. You have to bring prenatal women out. So I went until like the very last week of my pregnancy without any prenatal care. So I'm like, what's the point of having me in the jail when I could have been out doing what I'm supposed to do? If anything is wrong with this baby, you guys are like, major lawsuit. I lost weight. I was losing weight while I was, 9 months pregnant. And they were like, this is a problem. I'm like, well, let her skip a dose or bring the dose here and you guys administer it. But I need to go to a doctor. So finally, one night, it was like midnight, I went up to use the bathroom and my water broke. And I knocked on the door and I'm like, yo, it's go time. Like Thundercats are go. And they're like, okay, all right, we got this. And, the nurses come and they call the ambulance comes and I'm there and I'm strapped to a gurney ready to walk out and like go to the hospital. And the captain comes and he was like, stop, wait, we need to figure out the plan. And I'm like, you guys have had 4 weeks of me being here to figure out the plan. And the paramedic is like, you guys called us. There is no stop. There is no wait. There is no plan. The plan is to get her to a hospital because she's finna give birth. Her water is broken. Like once your water breaks, it's smooth sailing from there. So he was like, tell you what, we're going to take her to have a baby and you guys figure it out here and let us know. So that's what they did. They did call somebody from the medical wing. One of the people that was there with me called my boyfriend at the time. Now we're married because we married a month before my bond was revoked, and called him up and was like, they took her. She's having the baby. They're probably going to Sarasota Memorial. If you want to see your son born, that's what you got to do. So now I'm there. I'm in labor. I am not shackled to a bed. And there's a cop in the room. And every time I have a contraction, she's like, ugh, she's making like these nasty, disgusting sounds. And I'm like, could they have not found anybody else that could have come with me? Because you're not helping. And then all of a sudden I hear my husband in the hallway, like, babe, are you here? And I'm like, I'm here. And it's like a security breach. They're like, get him away from the door. But, I'm giving birth basically. And the nurses allowed him to stay, but like further away. And then once my son was born, they, cleaned him up and everything, let me hold him, and then took him to my husband so that he could meet him. And then they brought him back. And I remember feeling my husband's tears on the baby's hair, on Eli's hair, when they brought him back to me. But I was able to stay with him for 3 days before they released him. Because now, since I had a baby in custody, now the social workers have to be involved. And they have to do my house and make sure everything is like fine. So that took an extra day. But I'm grateful for it because A, I knew they weren't going to find anything crazy at my house. And B, that gave me an extra 24 hours with my son before I had to go back to the jail and he went back with my husband. So, yeah, during that time, I'm shackled to the bed, the baby staying with me the whole time in the room. And then finally they were like, it's time to go back. And that was not the most favorite thing for me to talk about, but it was really emotional.
Well, no, I mean, obviously as a mother, you want to be with your son.
Right.
That's
luckily I had an officer there with me who had been with me in that jail before I bonded out. So she knew how I operate. She knew that like I'm, a decent human being and everything. Like most of the officers that were there on a regular basis knew that this was like a real railroad job, and they felt for me. So she was really very gentle and kind and loving, like during me giving him to a social worker to hand off to my husband. And she took her time bringing me back. We circled around the block several times so I could she's like, get all the tears out that you need to get out, because we're not bringing them into that place. That place doesn't deserve your tears. So we took like a good half hour getting back to, the jail, which is right down the street. So she had some explaining to do there because that's a security thing. But, I went back and I actually stayed in that medical wing while I was going through postpartum, but they also gave me a pump so that I could send breast milk home to my son. And so while I'm pumping, I have to stay in that medical wing also. And at that point, I think it was like 4 months after I gave birth that I went to a sentencing hearing because I was tired. I was, out of money, like drained. And my attorney was like, hey, I could get you probation and you're going to have like a little bit more jail time to do. But I could get you probation for a long, long time and get you home to your son. Otherwise, if we risk this going to trial, we don't have their support anymore over in Italy. And they have all of this. He's like, I'm not confident I'm going to win at trial. And everything that you told me to subpoena is coming back not helpful. So he was like, let's just take this plea and be done with it. So I talked to my family and I'm like, what do you want to do? And they said, just do whatever it is that you feel like you can lay your head down on a pillow at night to do. But, you have your kids to think about now. So I took it. And as soon as that plea deal was signed, they took my pump away. I wasn't allowed to pump anymore and send home. They threw me back in GP. That was it. Then the one officer that brought me back to the jail pulled up my case and she was like, your attorney didn't subpoena anything. Like there's nothing, there's no record of subpoena in here. So I'm like, bro just took, $100,000 and ran and got me a plea deal. Good for him. Nothing.
So there's a lot of things that you just touched on that fucking really drive me nuts about the criminal justice system and the state and attorneys. And, part of the reason for doing this is to kind of shed a little bit of light on what the fuck actually goes on when you're behind bars and how you're treated. And I get it. A lot of people are like, fuck them, they're criminals. Like they fucked up. But I mean, listen to your story. It's kind of like, I think you kind of caught the raw end of a shady deal, working with a shady company, and now you have somebody who, for all intents and purposes, I mean, you were innocent. Your company kind of set you up to take a fall. Now you were the controller, so obviously there's
because I've had a lot of time to process it. It's new to you, it's old to me. But in order for me to like find some peace with the whole thing and move on and not be such an angry bitch, like I had to find a way to reconcile that. And I'm not guilty, but I am definitely responsible. Because
that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Because if I'm
like as a controller of a go ahead.
That's my job description. If there's a discrepancy with money, then that falls on my shoulder. Just like in any other position. If it happened on your watch, then you're responsible. But aside from that, if I'm being even deeply honest about this, there were plenty of red flags. There were plenty of things that I should have been paying attention to, and I chose not to because I was comfortable and I was benefiting from it. Like, truthfully, in your spidey senses and in your gut when something is off and when you should go. But if there's a payoff for you, then it's far less likely for you to go and do something about it unless you have incredibly staunch integrity. And I can fully admit right now that the integrity that I have right now, the character that I have right now that I've developed into, I didn't have then. So fuck everything else. They're paying me a good salary. They're giving me all these perks. I'm getting Italian lunch every day with wine and grappa. My integrity wasn't enough for me to leave all of the perks and all of the money that I was making. So that's where my guilt lies. I could have set off the alarms myself, but instead I waited for a customer to get pissed off enough to do it for us. And because of that, I get the bag. That's how
Yeah.
it works. And so I've come to a place of acceptance of that.
Well, but I also, so there's a couple different things here because you're right. And there's a level of accountability that has to be held in order to move forward and to grow. Obviously. I mean, I am by no means the same guy that I was 15 years ago when I was robbing houses, stealing, being a piece of shit, a drug addict. I am not that guy anymore. I had to come to terms with the fact, like, your morals aren't where your morals need to be. Like, you need to fucking grow. You need to grow up. Like, get your shit together and grow up. So I understand the level of accountability there. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quick, though, is just how people such as yourself, how citizens are treated when they go through the criminal justice system. Because, like you said, as soon as you sign that plea deal, your pump's gone. So not only does that affect you, it affects your son.
Yeah.
Not only does it affect you, it affects your husband at the time. It's always like this weird psychological fucking power game that these guys play in the jails and in the court system. And it's fucking mind breaking. Like it fucks people up to put somebody through now. And like I said, I get it. A lot of people sit on the other end of this and they're like, well, you're a fucking criminal. You committed a crime. Yes, you need to pay for that fucking crime. But to go through the criminal justice system the criminal justice system's just as broken as the prison system, as the judicial system. It's all fucking broken, and it's all just a big fucking game to a lot of these guys, the COs, all of them. I could tell you stories and stories and stories of people just being mistreated inside of jails.
Oh, 100%. I'm still subject to a lawsuit as a witness for somebody else for what happened in there. But I mean, it's the perfect storm. They pay shit. It's a government job. Yeah. So what kind of caliber of people are they going to bring in? But then they're also trained that we're animals and that we're manipulative and that we're going to turn on them at any one point. And they want to treat us with compassion. They want to treat us like human beings. But this person here is in here for murdering somebody. And that person there is in here for cutting bad checks. But they have to treat us the same. Unfortunately, they, for their own safety, they have to treat all of us, even the ones that are there for just cutting bad checks, as if they are the murderer. Because if they are treating us all the same, that's the baseline of safety that they have to take. So I understand that. Yeah. Why do you have to treat the murderer like that? Because I can promise you, you were probably in and out of the system, busting heads and breaking into houses and running around the streets. But I would much prefer the murderer living right next to me because it might be my house next. That was probably a one-time thing. They were living their life totally fine, and somebody pissed them off.
Absolutely,
he's dead. So they have it wrong. They have it like kind of backwards. But they're also not. I came up with this idea that truthfully, the only people that need to be really in jail are violent people that really have no chance whatsoever of coming out of it,
making it. Yeah.
Right. So if your crimes are drug related, why are you treating it with jail? You need to treat the disease. If your crimes are money related, why is that being inundated in the criminal court and not being put in civil court? Obviously, that's some kind of a tort. If there's theft involved, sure, okay, make that restitution or make that civil judgment really, really harsh. But the jails and the prisons are so overpopulated, and nobody can be treated the way that it's appropriate to be treated based upon the crime because they all have to be treated the same. So
it's all for profit these days anyway. That's why jails are overpopulated. That's why that's why there's no reform, because you figure I've had a couple guys on, one specifically, Mike, I can't remember his last name. I apologize, Mike, if you're listening. But he has done case studies on the prison systems overseas, like over in Switzerland, where it's basically like community-based reform, where you live in a big community. Like and the episode's up like earlier and on the YouTube channel, whatnot, if anybody wants to go look at it. But there's actual reform. Like they bring these guys in and you're not treated like animals. And going back to like what we were saying about the COs, police officers, attorneys. I understand there's bad apples in every bunch. I'm not sitting here saying all cops are bad. I'm not sitting here saying all COs are bad. There's obviously bad COs, bad cops, but there's really good ones too. But I guess there's a level of responsibility that you need to adhere to when you're in one of those positions, especially being a state prosecutor and thinking that, because every state prosecutor I've ever run into, they've got a God complex. But
Sure.
all right, so okay, so you're locked up now. You signed your plea deal, but that wasn't, you did not get to go home, correct? You were still sentenced to prison.
Yeah, I was. And it was like a little itty bitty, like I was sent and then let out, turn right back around.
Oh, okay.
So, but I was on probation then for, a long time. And
Well,
once,
and I chuckled when Andrew told me how long is your probation stint, because I was like in amazement when Andrew told me how long you have fucking probation.
initially it was 28 years. It was all restitution based. Call in once a month, pay your money, you're fine. Don't commit any new crimes. So
Yeah.
I'm on probation now. I have 2 more kids. It's been years. And I'm working for someone. They are being sued they've been using their dad. They have the same name as their father. So they've been using their dad's social security number for his good credit, even though he's dead. Like he's got a lot of problems and he needs some money real fast. So now he's got this chick who is working for him and is on probation for financial crimes. And he starts, like 2 days after my daughter is born, he was like, there's some problems with accounting. This is your fault. You're going to give me back this amount of money or I'm calling the police. I'm going to get your probation violated, all this stuff. So he's basically like blackmailing me. And I'm scared as shit because I have PTSD, like serious PTSD from all this. I've just spent my life savings and part of my parents' life savings bonding out, paying for attorney. I'm not going through this again. Do I want to pay $100,000 to an attorney to defend me for what this guy is saying and probably end up going back to prison because I'm a convicted felon? And who's going to believe me? Or do I want to give this guy 17 grand and be done with it? So I start paying him 17 grand and that makes me look even guiltier. So he doesn't like, the pace of things. And he goes to the cops and he was like, she's stealing money from me. Look, she's a convicted felon. No proof of it, just an accusation, a newspaper article, and that's it. Oh, and she's a convicted felon. So cops start coming to me about it. Again, I have an attorney. I'm not talking to you. It's 2 days after my daughter's born that this starts. And by the time the cops come to me, she's 5 months old. So my attorney was like, here's what we're going to do. You're going to submit your computers for financial or forensic analysis. We're going to take a lie detector test. We're going to subpoena his stuff. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're doing all of this. And I'm like, cool. Thank you. So we do. Polygraph comes back clear. I'm telling the truth. Computers come back clear. Nothing was ever done on my computer. Nothing was ever done on his computer when I was at his office. Checks come back clear. Like nothing is up with this. The problem with this is that that's a separate charge. I have to turn myself in. I have to get rearrested or get arrested. I have to bond out on that charge. And that bond is like $100. That's nothing. And then I could go home. But since I'm on probation, that violates my probation. So I have to go and turn myself in to Sarasota and get rearrested on VOP. Unheard of. This happened 3 times. Unheard of. I get ROR on this bond or on a VOP. Usually if you violate your probation, you're sitting, you don't get a bond. I get ROR. So I get out. This pisses the prosecutor off big time. So now they're like, oh, you tried to register to vote. I never registered to vote. Husband number 1, who's really pissed off at me still, he submitted a voter registration form in my name called Leo and said a convicted felon is trying to register to vote. So that gets me arrested. That gets dropped, but it violates my probation. So I have to go for another VOP, ROR. So then the prosecutor's like, what the fuck? So find something else. I got into a car accident. My insurance, the day before my car accident, my insurance policy canceled, and my husband got a new policy that fucking day. Like midnight that night it started. I called the wrong insurance company to file a claim, fraudulent insurance claim. The prosecutor really wants me to be sitting on a VOP. They don't want me to be out on ROR. That's the big part of the criminal justice system, is that they know that ordinarily a judge is not going to let you out, and they want you sitting, because a sitting person is more likely to plea out than somebody who's home and fighting. So they arrest me for that. It gets dropped, but it still violates my probation, and I have to go turn myself in, get rearrested, new mugshot, and I go in front of the judge, and they're like, well, we ROR'd you these last 2 times. We're just going to give you a bond, $2,000 bond. So $200, I'm out. So now I'm fighting 3 VOPs in 3 cases, and they get dropped. But before they could get dropped, I have to go to a VOP hearing. And basically, it's another little trial. And it's not beyond a reasonable doubt when you're dealing with a VOP. Now it's a propensity to commit these crimes based upon your past. So this judge is looking at my previous charges and what the likelihood is that I'm committing similar charges again, which are all fraud. And she's like, it's a pattern. You know, I had psych evals to mediate this. I had social investigators in my house. I had people like in my family being interviewed. I had previous employers interviewed, all of this to mitigate what a sentence would be if I were found guilty of violation of probation. So all of these people testify for me, and this judge is still like, I think you did it. So 8 years. Credit for all the time you did before, but 8 years in prison. So remand right away, by the way. And the fucked up thing about this is that we were told, my attorney, the prosecutor, my probation officer who stuck up for me, all of us were told that this was probably going to be continued. Like, the judge.
And you walk in and get railroaded.
Right. Like I had shit in the crock pot and my kids with a nanny. Like my house was totally still stacked. Like I was unprepared. But she was like 8 years, remand, blah, blah, blah. And everybody is sitting in the courtroom just jaw dropped. But the really fucked up thing is that months later, all of these things get dropped. So now I'm in prison for a violation of probation that never happened. And I appeal it. But since I'm there, I'm caught, I'm in, I'm not a priority. So
up, man.
I did it the whole time. And like a year before I'm released, that's when they were like, oh, we're going to hear your appeal. We're hearing your appeal now. So they bring me out to court, and it was really just like a dog and pony show. They had no intention of ever letting me go. They just wanted to give me my due process and show that the process worked or whatever. So I lose.
So how many? So you served 7 years?
Altogether, yeah, 7 years.
7 years. What prison were you in down in Florida?
Oh gosh, all of them, all of them except for Gadsden. But BCI, which is now closed, that was the death row prison. So again, I'm white collar, but they have me in a max security prison. And anytime you go through intake, you have to go to the highest security because they haven't classified you yet. So I'm there. And then they transfer me because BCI was closing, they transferred me to the reception center, which is in Ocala, right next door to Lowell. So that's another reception center. Then from the reception center, FWRC, Florida Women's Reception Center, I go to Hernando, which is a place that I requested to go to. It's a faith and character based compound. So you can take a lot of classes and earn a lot of cred. And I wanted that because I have an appeal going on. So I want all of these programs underneath my belt for that. Eventually, though, they kick my bed and they send me back to FWRC because they pulled my number for a modality program for drug and alcohol abuse. I've never done drugs and I don't really drink all that much. So I don't know why my number is pulled, but whatever. They have me at the reception center for about 3 months, and then they move me over to Lowell. Now, Lowell is the largest female prison, largest women's prison, 3,500 women altogether. And it is notorious. There are so many investigations and lawsuits against Lowell for everything from raping there on the same compound, a woman being turned into a quadriplegic because these officers slammed her on her neck, and she has won a $4.5 million lawsuit. She will never walk again. She will never use her arms again. She's got a breathing tube because she can't even, like, her brain can't even alert her lungs to breathe. So, and they did that. And the guy who did it, the lieutenant who did it, never got charged for it. But he did get charged with raping and molesting his stepdaughter and her friend, and he's serving 25 years in prison for that. But nobody is accountable for Cheryl. So I get moved over to Lowell. I'm on the main, and then they move me over to the annex, which is like the highest security. That's now where death row is. Death row was moved there when BCI closed. So I'm in the dorm right next to death row. I get to see them come out and, play basketball under watch and then go right back in. But I'm in their modality program there for about 6 months before it gets shut down. They lose the contract. And then they have to move me over to the work camp, which is the lowest security. Those are the girls at the work camp that go out on chain gang, and they mow the side of the road in the cities. While I was at Hernando, I got really into fitness. I had a gate pass myself. I was going out into the cities and I was cleaning up the streets and stuff like that. But my father was going through cancer, and he had like emergency surgery. They found a tear in his aorta, all of that stuff. And so when that stuff happens, they pull your gate pass because now you're a flight risk. It's a highly emotional situation. You have more of a likelihood of taking off to be with your family and everything. This is my real father.
Yeah.
They didn't know that I didn't have like much of a relationship with him, but they do it anyway. So while I am, my gate pass is pulled, they're not taking from me. They're just not letting me work it. So I have all this time now to exercise, run, do my yoga, all that stuff. And it catches attention. So they have this now in my little file. I go to Lowell. I go through the 6 months of modality. That closes down. I go to the work camp. I have to go through the modality program there. That one is probably the most traumatizing experience I've ever had in my life. They started me over. It was only supposed to be for a year. Now she started me over. All in all, I did 18 months. It's like 30 women, and it's an accountability based program. I did take the meat and leave the bones of it, but really it's like everybody telling on each other, everybody trying to get up on
Get one over.
counters, pulling each other up on their awareness, and you have punishments. It's traumatizing because every single thing that you're doing is being watched. It's incredible. It's very rule based, not just the prison rules. Like if it says you're not allowed to tie your sheets tight in order to keep your sheets from moving all around this poly mattress, and you get caught doing it, you're getting pulled up. That's a prison rule. If part of your class B uniform is still to wear socks, you better not be walking around in your slides with bare feet, even though it's Florida and it's 110 degrees in the dorms and you don't have air conditioning. Don't you dare get caught not wearing socks. The only time that you're okay with not wearing socks is in the shower or when you're actually sleeping in the bed. Like you have to be on your bed, and then you could take your socks off. So then there's the program rules themselves that you have to follow. Going to be on the phone, sign your name on a list. If you're going to go out onto the track to run, sign your name that you're signing out and then sign back in. It's incredibly crazy. And I bucked it quite a bit. And it got to the point where this program director, she hated me. I knew it. She knew it. I grieved her all the time. She was like, we're going to be checking your mail. We're going to have these inmates over here reading your mail before you get it. And then we're going to read it just to make sure. And then you're going to get it. Then you can read it. People are going to walk with you to the mailbox to drop your mail to make sure it's going to exactly where you say it's going. And then, come back. I'm like, I don't understand why. But that was very, very problematic. That felt very illegal. and it felt very like
Right.
against the rules. So I grieved her. Nothing happened. We all know nothing happens in a grievance process. And she
Right.
started retaliation like way, way more. So that's when I went to the captain and I was like, I'm putting myself in protective custody against this woman. I can't do this program because there's no way she's ever going to graduate me. And if I don't graduate, then if I sign out, I lose work release entirely. So it's a setup for failure right now at this point. So I get put in protective custody for like 6 weeks. In I'm sitting in solitary basically for 6 weeks before I'm like, listen, I'm done. I can't. We're not allowed to shave. I haven't seen the sunlight. I can't get food. Please let me go. So I dropped it and they put me right back in that program. But by the time that happened, that now I'm out to court. When I come back from court, because obviously I lost. Again, they put me right back in the program, and it's getting worse and it's worse and it's worse. So I finally I'm like I can't. I'm giving up the dream of work release. I'm signing out, and I did confinement because it's considered a refusal to work. I lost a lot of my game time. I think I lost like 30 or 60 days of game time, but I had enough time to get it back. In Florida, we don't have parole. We have to do 85% of our time, and that's it. Like that's the minimum that we can do. But if you mess up, you lose all of it, but you can earn it back. So a refusal to work costed me like 30 days in confinement, and then I think 60 days of my game time, and then I gained it all back. But the problem was is that I needed that work release because I needed that money to go home because my family wanted so bad for me to live in a house with my sister, who I don't have a relationship with, I don't get along with. When I was in protective custody, um, I told her I'm not going to be able to call the kids. I'm not going to be able to call my ex-husband. I'm not going to be able to do any of this because, I'm locked up and I put myself in protective custody. She doesn't know anything about the prison system. So she calls up there and she's like, what can we do to like make this faster? Because she's in protective custody. And they're like, there's no such thing as protective custody. It's either administrative or disciplinary, which is semantics. We all know that protective custody is administrative. But she goes back to my
Right.
ex-husband and she was like, she's lying. She got into trouble. She's probably doing this, this, and that. And he is like, I'm tired of this. And this starts a 5-month period where he doesn't let me talk to the kids. So I know that this is kind of later on, we're going to talk about something else, but this is the lead up to that. Right before I went to prison, he and I separate, and I'm living on my own. I'm a single mom. Like we are freshly separated. We're about to go through a divorce, but he is like back and forth with this. He's like, some days he wants me back, some days he doesn't. Um, Obviously, he's tired of the legal shit. I don't blame him for that at all. But he's treating me the way that a CEO would treat me. Like some days he's okay and he's like borderline, and other days he's treating me just like an animal. And I'm done with it. I don't deserve it. I leave him. So, the whole time I'm locked up, it's back and forth. But if I'm telling him while I'm locked up, if I'm telling him I don't want this, I don't want to come back to you, then that starts months of him not letting me speak to the kids. I bring him to court while
Yeah.
I'm locked up, forcing him to at least put me on a schedule to talk to the kids twice a week at a certain time, and at least 4 times a year bring the kids to see me. And if he can't do it, let my mom and my dad do it, or my stepdad. So that's on the books. He never really adheres to it. He goes 4 years without bringing them, and then finally the last year he brings them 3 times. But if there's ever any point where I'm like, I don't want you back, I just want to talk to my kids, I just want a relationship with my kids, unfortunately I have to call your phone to do it, that will start months of him not answering the phone. And I try every single day that I'm there, that I'm allowed to. So now she has taken this info and she goes back to my ex and she's like, she's lying, she's not in protective custody, it's just disciplinary, whatever. And he is like, I'm done. And 5 months, no talking to my kids. I finally get out after signing out and losing my game time. And my classification officer sits me down and she was like, they paid attention to you and Hernando. We know that this was just a blip. We know you can't go to work release, but we know that you are a model inmate. And she said something really interesting. She was like, you're a model inmate, but you're not necessarily a model inmate. She's like, we don't want people who are model inmates. We want people who are model citizens. And she says, the way that you trusted the process, you went through the process, and obviously it didn't work out for you. Your attitude is still really good. And so at Lowell, they have youthful offenders. So it's kind of like a boot camp for them. If you're 17 to 22, you can be put in that program.
So like scared straight.
No, like they're
well, but only you're locked up.
Yeah,
so.
You're locked up and you're really young. You're not allowed to be a part of GP. Okay. If you're under 18, you can't be with the older inmates.
Yeah.
But if you're part of that
right.
program, you have to graduate out of it. So if you got into that program at 17 and you have not tiered up when you're 21, you're still in that program, even though you're old enough to be a part of GP. If you get kicked out, you go back to GP, but you lose a lot of your game time and your classification is higher, you don't have the same privileges. So me, I am a medium to minimum. And she's like, you got the raw end of the deal. We recognize that. We also recognize all the fitness stuff that you were doing, how you've grown there. And we've selected you to be a wellness instructor. But as a wellness instructor, you're also going to be working with the youthful offenders. So I was one out of the 4 women in the whole state of Florida that was allowed to work with the youthful offenders, allowed to talk to them. So I had to get up super early, run drills with them, then come back, work wellness, teach fitness classes. My schedule for doing that would then put me back with the youthful offenders to run drills with them at lunch. And then I needed my own rec time. I needed my own meal time. So my schedule was totally different than everybody else's in GP. People were going to lunch, seeing me run my laps in my gym shorts on the rec field because that's the only rec time that I had. My headphones in, cops totally fine with it. My time to go to the store was totally different than anybody else's. And the cops would be like, yeah, just go ahead, go shop, whatever. Evenings, I would go back and run drills with the YOs and talk to them. Sometimes I would do scared straight with them. I would try to get people in that could do special programs with them to make sure they don't come back. And that's how I spent the rest of my time, just my head up, my head down, leave me alone. I'm not around the rest of GP. I have my own schedule. It was a very privileged and pampered last year of my time there before I EOS'd. But I talked to my family and I'm like, I'm not coming back to a house that has my sister in it. We've never had a great relationship, but this was the final straw. You got yourself involved with something that you know nothing about in communication with my kids.
Yeah.
There's no coming back for that. I'm not mad at you. I don't hate you. I'm not rocking with you at all. That's what you do. And so I was like, if I have to go back to a halfway house, then that's what I'm going to do. So my mom told my sister, hey, my sister was living in the house that I was going to be coming home to. And my mom was like, hey, Annique's coming home, so you're going to have to go. So my sister found another place, but she lived in that house 5 years rent free. And then I come in, I EOS, I come home. It's on the drive home, it's a 2-hour drive home. They're like, yeah, Casey left, but she also left her nephew there, or your nephew there, her son, who's 20. And I'm like, okay, at this point, I'm divorced. I go through my divorce hearing while I'm in prison. The day I got out of confinement for signing out of that program is I had to run to the classification office, leave all of my shit at the gate, run to the classification office and jump onto a Zoom hearing for my divorce hearing, the trial, basically. So at that time, the judge was like, since you don't know really where you're going to be living, where you're going to be working, if you're going to have a car, I'm giving you this much custody, this much contact with your kids once you come home, and we'll revisit it after you're home and after you're established to get more time. Cool, thanks, great, we'll do that. It made sense to me because I didn't know where I was going to be, and he left the door open for more. So when I'm EOSing, I go, I know now where I'm going to live. I'm living in this house. My parents own it. And as soon as I sit down with them, once I get out, they're like, so how are you going to pay rent? My sister has been in this house for 5 years without paying any rent. So they're like, how are you going to pay rent? And I'm like, I'm going to work. That's what I'm going to have to do. And then I'm looking at my nephew, and I had just spent 5 years in very close proximity with drug addicts and people who were fighting their own demons. And I'm looking at my nephew and I'm like, I'm onto you. Like, I see it. I see you. So I'm like, if you bring anything into this house at all, then you are out. Like, I'm having my parents kick you out. I'm having grandma kick you out. If you bring anything in this house, if you are high in this house, if you bring people over high, then I will throw your ass out, because I'm on probation again. I was resentenced to 8 years with 15 years of probation. But aside from that, my kids are going to be here, and I don't want you around them like that. So he's like, yeah, I totally get it. Totally get it. Absolutely. Well, I caught him several times. Bringing paraphernalia into the house. One time he left his bong right next to my kid's hermit crab cage, which is like where they would make a beeline to when they came back to my house, is what's going on with the hermit crabs, and his shit's right there. One time I was leaving for work, like super early in the morning, like 6:30 in the morning, and he's passed out in the driveway, hanging out of a car, blaring, and the neighbors were like, what's going on? So, my mom and dad own the house. They were like, he's got to live there. It's a pandemic. Where's he going to go? We're not allowed to evict people. And I'm like, A, I'm the only one paying rent, so you're not really evicting him. You don't have a lease. B, this is the problem with probation, with my kids, with all of that stuff. This is why it's problematic. My mom has always been my sister's biggest enabler. My sister has always been the biggest manipulator, and I have been my mom's biggest enabler all my life. And my mom has been incredibly manipulative and very martyrish with me. And now she's got all these legal bills, and I stood by you in prison, and all of this stuff hanging over my head, thinking that that's going to be her way to control me and make me do the things that she wants me to do. What she really wants me to do, in order to enable my sister, is allow my nephew to stay. So I'm trying so much to show her, I can't have this here. Look, I'm taking pictures of paraphernalia. I'm doing all this stuff to prove to her. And she just doesn't believe me. And she's like, if you have such a problem with it, you get out. You get out of the house. So it's a pandemic. I'm a convicted felon. I'm not going to pass a background check for a new rental application or anything. And, plus rent is ridiculous. And I'm an independent contractor. I'm self-employed, basically. So, how am I going to prove income? There's no way anybody's going to rent me. So I go to my stepdad. I basically go above my mom's head. Like, I'm talking to the manager, and I'm like, I'm the one that's paying you rent. I'm the one that is maintaining the house. I've replaced walls and carpet because my nephew has just killed it. I have this dog here that they just left here that I had to bring back to health. You saw him before. That's my Kobe. Yeah. I had to pay $2,000 to get him back to health because he's got liver failure and sores in his mouth and all that shit because they're not taking care of him. I'm doing the yard work. I put up a fence. I did all this shit. I am paying rent. Do you want me to leave, or do you want this kid to leave? Because that's what your house is going to look like if he stays. And not only that, but I'm going to buy this house off of you. I just said it out loud, and they didn't believe that I could do it. He was like, I'll rent to you for 6 months, and then in 6 months, we have to start a sales agreement. Cool. So that's what we did, and he kicked my nephew out. Once he kicked my nephew out, my mom was like, I don't want to have anything to do with you ever again. And I'm like, bet. I will leave you alone forever is what I'll do.
Right.
So that was when my relationship with my family stopped. My stepdad, her husband, was like, I still want to have a relationship with you. I love you. And I loved him too, very much. But I knew that if he maintained a relationship with me, my mom would make his life miserable. So he would do little things like he would call me and be like, "Oh, I got this bill about the house." And I'm like, "That was paid a year ago." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, you know my memory. How you doing?" Like that would be his way of maintaining a relationship with me. But like as far as hanging out, going to dinners and stuff like that, if he told my mom I'm going to see Annique or whatever, she would make him absolutely miserable.
Blow the gasket.
So,
So, okay, so you're home now and you're an independent
right.
contractor. So what you obviously had a little bit of background going into brokering
Right.
freight. That's what you do
Mhm.
now. So what you obviously jumped right back into that. So talk a little bit about that, and you're also a yoga coach as
Yeah.
well. And what would and were you doing yoga with while you were in prison? Is that what got
Yeah.
you
So,
like fixated on it,
yeah,
or
before I went back into jail, that I became a broker. So I worked for a larger 3PL. They trained me in brokering. Actually, no, they trained me in sales. Basically, fell into brokering. I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing until a driver was like, "Yo, guess what? You need to go out on your own because you're the one that's managing everything." And they knew the company that I was working with, and they're like, they don't have brokers there. They just have sales reps, and then they have an operations department. They have a customer service department. And he was like, "You're probably being paid a salary. You're probably being paid benefits. If you don't mind me asking, what is it?" And I told him, and he was like, "Yeah, break out on your own. You'll make that. You'll pay for your own benefits. Just do it on your own." So I did. And then I got sued because I signed a non compete and I didn't read it.
right?
So I basically, now I'm on my own and I have to start completely over. I don't have the customers that I thought were coming with me. And it was really real fast. It snowballed into a success story. But now I'm going to prison. So, um, I had some customers once I came home, they were like, "Oh, you're back, you're doing it. Cool, let's go. What do you have for this?" And then I also had to take advantage of the fact that it's a pandemic and there are a lot of my customers that are now non-essential. And so I have to like really hone my sales, and I'm hungry because I just came home and it's a pandemic and it's probably going to be a failure. I'm probably going to fail at this because of what the world's circumstances are. And I really got to see what I was made of and really see my own tenacity. People were like, "You're home now. Like, you can apply for food stamps. You can apply for this. You can apply for that, and you'll get it because you're just coming out of prison and it's a pandemic." And I'm like, I need to be hungry. If I'm not hungry, I'm not going to push. So I
Yeah,
was up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning researching leads and, sales strategies and contact information. And I was up at 6 a.m. and I was doing the same thing. And I was just hustling. And I built just as fast as before, when I had to start all over again. That's how quick it happened. And part of it was luck, calling the right people, but a lot of it was me learning how to pivot and adapt and adjust and working.
I want to stop you real quick just because you said two things. First of which being obviously you have to learn how to pivot. You for anybody that's coming out of prison, obviously it will benefit you tremendously to have the mindset that you're not going to fail, but to be able to pivot. Like I've said that for a long time. Like you have to have a skill set,
Yeah,
not just one skill to fall back on.
right. Because like think about it, like think about the people in prison that don't have people sending them money. They don't have commissary.
Well, yeah,
So
and
what do they
yeah,
do? They do laundry, they roll cigarettes, they do
yeah,
whatever, aside from like getting drugs brought in or cigarettes or whatever brought in because they're not allowed there, but like doing the real hustles for people, like
yeah,
you're an entrepreneur. That's what it is. Like you're
yeah,
selling your services, you're doing the services, you're making sure they're happy. That's sales. That's operations, that's customer service. Turn that into something legal.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, like, you are used to, at any point in time, somebody kicking your bed and saying, pack it up, you're moving, you're going to a new facility. And you have to be okay with that change real fast. You have to be able to turn on your toes and say, okay, we're doing something different now. Or, okay, circumstances are changed. I have to, and who hasn't had their bed kicked to go to a different facility, knowing that 5 people on the yard owe them money or owe them commissary.
Yeah.
And you just got to be okay with that loss and move on to the next thing and earn it back. But while I was there, I was like, I need to have a better echo chamber. Like, I need to not hear all of this run the streets shit, because that's not what my life was before, and it's not what it is after. That's not what it's
No. I stayed so far. It was funny because I was actually, when I was locked up, I was approached by a certain gang, certain guys wanting me to click up with them, and I, like you just said, I had mentally made the choice when I went down there. I was sticking to myself. I was doing me. I was getting my life together. I was getting in shape. Like you said, I had to be in a different. I wasn't feeding into the bullshit. So you have to make that. Right. You have to make that choice, and I think it's, once you make that choice, it's hard. It could go either way. Like, you're either going to get fucked with, and you're not going to have any of the homies to have your back. But I surrounded myself with a good group of guys down there that weren't clicked up with any gangs, and we just worked out all the time, kicked it, played cards, and did our thing. Nobody really messed with us.
You know that saying, like attracts like. So yeah, laws of attraction. So I'd always done yoga. I've been doing yoga since like 2001. And when I first started doing yoga, I was like, I just want Madonna's abs. That's all. Don't talk to me about the spirituality of it. Don't talk to me about breathing. I just want just give me the abs. But then, and I'd always done it, and it was usually used by me as a way to separate myself or deal with things, it got me into a meditative place in my mind. So it was useful in that way. But now I'm in prison, and I'm trying to stay away from the people who are stealing out of the kitchen and hustling to get cigarettes and all of that stuff, and robbing people, and getting their lockers kicked in all the time. And I'm like, and I'm also doing all of this wellness stuff and doing a lot of workouts. So I need to stretch. So I'm like, you know what? The people that I'm trying to stay away from, they never do yoga. So I'm just going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do what I like to do. I'm going to do what's helpful to me, and the right people are going to find me. And they did. And there are like a good handful of people that I still keep in touch with. And I've been gone for years. Like, I've been out for years and years. But if you are in and you meet somebody that keeps in touch with you, if you get like a good year of them keeping in touch with you, then you're solid. I'm on 5. So
I have one. He was my home. Mm-hmm. It's a traumatic experience for everybody. So if you find somebody that's decent down there and they stick around, then keep those relationships, because it's him and I love going back and forth and just talking shit. But yeah.
So the way that I remained in yoga after is, I was just like, I feel like I owe yoga more than just coming to it when I'm in need. It's like that friend that only comes to you when they need something or when they're in trouble, instead of maintaining a relationship, when things are good too. That's how I was treating yoga. Like, it's not fair. And I would get more of a benefit. I would get more enrichment if I maintained it, because once you do incorporate the breathing, once you do incorporate the yogic philosophies and, the ethics of it, your life really does become enhanced. When you really study it, there's a book called The Yamas and the Niyamas, and it talks about the ethics and principles of yoga. So you have non-stealing, you have non-violence, you have non-attachment, non-abundance, you have honesty, all that stuff. Those are the ethics of it. If you're really honest with yourself in yoga, then you know how far your body can go. If you're not violent with yourself in yoga, then you're not going to beat yourself up because you're not there yet. And it's a big place of acceptance. It teaches you about your breathing and things like that. And if you can handle all of that on the mat, then you can take it off the mat and still apply it to everything.
Oh yeah.
So that became a big thing. And again, like attracts like. So I'm doing all of these things and I become attracted to my now best friend, Erin, and she owns a yoga studio. She's a life coach. She's federally certified and like nationally certified in life coaching. She runs a program. She charges a lot of money for these programs, but I would go to her yoga studio because I liked she's one of the only yoga studios in town that actually incorporates the principles and the yamas and the breath work and stuff. Everybody else is just like look good in yoga pants and see how flexible you can get. That's all a byproduct.
No, never
Yeah,
that.
right. So I like the principles of her studio and the model. So I started going and I started doing her programs too. And she became my best friend. And I coach her. She coaches me. We have like a knit of like 4 or 5 people that we do that with every. Yeah, that's Erin. That's me.
Is this
Yeah,
her?
that's Erin.
Okay. I figured that's who you were
Yeah.
talking about.
That's my Beebs. But so we have gone on retreats together. I taught at the studio. I'm an instructor all around town. So because of me just getting deeper with it and really like committing to it, it shows. So there's like a good 10 people in our area that are known, like their names are known amongst the yoga community. And I'm to say that I'm one of them. So I substitute in many studios around town and yoga. That's us in Costa Rica. That's Arnal. That's a volcano, an active volcano that we hiked up. Sarah, the blonde
Nice.
all the way to the right behind me, that's Sarah. She's she owns Kava Social Club down here, and then all the way to the left, that's Dr. Stephanie Minter, and she's also like one of my besties, and she's gone through the coaching and life coaching and all and the yoga teacher training, but she's a physician. So her modus operandi is she is treating the person, not the illness. She is seeing everything that there is to do with your health. So if you have this problem, how is your mental health manifesting that? And how can we improve everything, including your eating, to fix it? So like, it's when I say it's a lifestyle, I mean it's a choice of how you want to live and a deeper awareness of how everything that you have been through has brought now and how you can change it. So
well, I think that's a big thing that a lot of people miss regularly as far as just fitness in general goes. Correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah,
This is a yoga thing, but it's of like mind, body, and spirit.
that
Correct?
just makes sense.
Or is that just something
If you
I'm
speak,
making up? Yeah. So I mean, you have to be aligned.
For us, it's like such a novel concept here in the West. But if you talk to people in India and you're like, yeah, so I'm feeling like tightness in my shoulders. So I figure I'm eating foods that are a little too inflaming. And they're like, yeah, and that just makes sense. But for us, it's like, oh, so I don't need a steroid. Like, this is Hacienda El Chambra in Costa Rica. That is a whole coffee farm. And that is, I'm doing yoga in a hand over a valley. Yep.
I was going to ask because I thought that's what that was, but I wasn't sure. That's cool. So, okay. So talk just a little bit about what your mindset was. I mean, you're obviously, this is something that I ask everybody kind of towards the end is, you made a comment that I really appreciated. And when I came home from prison, I didn't realize there was programs available. I didn't realize there was, but I've always been a worker. I knew the second my feet touched that pavement, it was go time. It was time to prove everybody wrong. It was time to take my life back. I was motivated, but you made a comment. And you said you needed to stay hungry in order to succeed. And I fucking love that because I was the same way. Now I didn't realize there was programs available like I do now. I've got a whole website that's got just grants, everything from grants, how to get aid as a convicted felon, housing. I had no idea any of that was even available. I thought you get your gate pay and you hit the streets and you're done. But I was in the same mindset, but I never thought of it like that. Like you have to stay hungry in order to succeed, because if things start getting handed to you, there's not any fight, that you're not working for anything, you're not going to achieve anything. So talk a
I
little bit
still
about your
agree with
mindset
that.
as far as all that
But
goes.
that was my mindset when I first came home, because I also didn't have any kind of expectation of anybody helping me. I didn't have any expectation of people supporting me, because that
Yeah.
hasn't been my experience. I didn't have a family that was very supportive at this point, because they were very embarrassed about everything that I had gone through, and most of them have cut me off, except for my mom and my stepfather. But now my mom has cut me off, after I came home. So now I'm entirely on my own, and I don't know what true support looks like. I don't know what true help looks like. That isn't attached to conditions. My mom helped me the whole time I'm in prison, but now she's expecting me to do a whole bunch of things that I'm not willing to do. Like, you were pissed off at me for leaving my kids and going to prison, but now you want me to stay in a situation that would get me violated and send me back to prison, leaving my kids. Like, you want me to keep my nephew here and risk that. Like, that doesn't make sense. So I had to cut them off. And that's where I learned boundaries, and how the people who seem to be helping you can sometimes really be hurting you and keeping you sick. So I think that the life that they saw for me when I came home was going to be very limited, because that fits a narrative and that fits a stigma of a convicted felon. And my mom was like, just get a job bartending, or take this job at $10 an hour. And I'm like, no, like, I have to be able to take care of myself. I have to be able to feed my kids. I also have to be able to, like, mentally live up here in a safe place. And if I'm beating myself up because that's all I'm doing, then I'm not going to like myself, especially when I know that I have the potential and ability for more. So I think that what really makes her and the rest of my family and a lot of people in society angry is that I have surpassed what they think I deserve. So,
Oh yeah, yep. Everybody wants to see you. That's a big thing on, I think, on my side of the family, and my wife says it all the time because I beat myself up sometimes, and Mary has told me time and time again. She said everybody wants to see you do great,
like, a lot of the
until
thing
you're
that I
doing
hear a
better
lot,
than
because
them.
I'm going through custody. It's taken 4 fucking years because of the way that the court system works, but, like, I'm fighting for official more custody with my kids. My ex-husband, when I came home, was like, yeah, I'll allow more. As long as I didn't bring him to court, I'll allow more. So he was, we had 50-50. They were sleeping over, all that stuff. As soon as I piss him off, though, just like when I was in prison, and he wouldn't answer the phone, now he's taking. And there's nothing in writing that says so. So I've taken him to court to get more. My family is testifying against me. My mother is bankrolling his attorney, like, all of this stuff, because they're so angry. And the thing that they have said the most is she shows no remorse. She shows no remorse for all of this. So what I've been like grappling in my head about that, like, how am I supposed to show remorse more than what I've done? Because in my mind, remorse is a changed life. Remorse is changed behavior. Remorse is accountability and apology and acceptance of responsibility. Remorse is amends. I've made all the amends with my kids. They have a fantastic life with me. I've acknowledged and sat down and talked to them and said, Mom messed up and made mistakes, and you guys are the victims of this. You know what I mean? The people who they say I took money from, they're not the victims of this. Even my family is the victim of this, because they had to. I got the easy part. We got the easy part. We go to prison and we're fed. The lights are on, all of that. They get the hard part. Let's be real. And I just did an interview with Stanford University, as a formerly incarcerated person. And I said the same thing. Like, we have it the easiest. All we have to do is change our address and do what we're told. Everybody else has to deal with the stigma. Everybody else has to deal with oh, how's Annique doing? Well, she's in prison, and that embarrassment. That's traumatic for them too. So I've been, like, very remorseful, but I think what they want to see from us is shame. So I have remorse without shame, and that's very audacious to them. Like, I
Yeah.
should be ashamed. I'm not. It's embarrassing, but it's also a real success story, because look where I started from
Well,
negative to this.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's where I've always hung my hat. A lot of people, I make the comment all the time that I'm very open with my life on social media solely because of where I was and where I am now. And I almost use I mean, obviously I use social media as kind of like a lighthouse. Like, I'm very transparent. I will tell you anything you ever want to know about my life. I always have since I came home. I wasn't always that way. I was a fucking liar. I was a cheat. I was a thief. I was a fucking asshole before I went to prison. But after I came home, I have been very transparent with everybody. I have lived a life of being like honest and loving, and I'm here to help. But you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people, especially in society with families, so on and so forth, they want it's a level of shame
Right.
to accommodate your recovery. Like you should always be ashamed of it. And I'm not fucking doing that. I'm not ashamed of what I did. I'm not the only reason, like you just said, the only reason that I have regrets about
Right.
anything that I ever did in my life was the people I hurt. The fact that my kids had to go years without me. The fact that like you said, my mom had to run into people and they'd be like, oh, what's Chris up to? Well, he's fucking incarcerated, you know? Um, that's what I regret. I don't
Mhm.
regret anything that I've done, and you're never going to catch me being shameful for anything that I've done. I'm not built like that, and just like you
Just
said,
because just because I'm
you're not built
discreet
like that
about
either.
it
So
doesn't mean that I'm
I don't
ashamed
think
of
there's
it.
anything wrong
It's
with it.
like time and place. Like, I don't have to be
No, no,
going
no.
around,
People,
hey, this is what
yeah,
I do. And by the way, I went to prison. Like,
yeah,
that I don't have to do that. If it comes up, like, all right, so there's
yeah,
somebody, Small World Ventures also dispatches. So there's a driver that came and approached me about services, and he's like, I'm starting out, I'm going to be getting 10 trucks, blah, blah, blah. He didn't really disclose who he was right off the bat. And then he had his financial advisor contact me, and he was like, yeah, because of who he is and blah, 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 we always look up everybody that we're going to be working with. And I'm like, who is this dude? And he is a former NFL football player that is retired, and now he's getting into trucking. And they were like, he looked you up and he wants to give you a chance, but and I'm like, I don't even think about it. Like, it's not everything that I'm doing right now is proof
yeah,
positive that that's not who I am. That's not what I do. Like, I would think that my actions and my life kind of speaks to the changes that I've made, because people who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing don't have the
yeah.
life that reflects positivity, and I do.
No, no. People in the trenches are, yeah. It's funny being in. Now I can understand as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, somebody going into business with somebody. I get the whole looking up thing. I
Sure.
do that. I do that with people I just randomly meet. I mean, but you can also go back through and you look at where somebody's at in their life, and you should be able
Okay.
to.
No, I
I mean, it was how many years have
much
you been
less.
home?
I've done
Fucking
a
10 years, 15 years,
lot.
5 years. Oh, 5 years. But either way, for 5 years, you've done a lot. Like you have a beautiful home. Like you're working to get your kids back. You have your own business. There's nothing. It drives me nuts when people want to do shit like that. Well, it doesn't drive me nuts. Like I said, I understand it. But I get so
Yeah.
irritated with the whole
The
"you made a mistake,
evolution
now
of
you
how
have to
I've
live
handled
with that
that
mistake for the rest
in
of
the
your life"
last
mentality.
several
That
years, it has been kind of like my measuring stick of where I am mentally. Because when I first came home, if anybody ever mentioned prison, I was like, don't, hide it. We're not talking about that. Let's pretend that never happened. And then it became, well, they're going to do it
yeah,
anyway. So I might as well get out in front of it first, because one thing you're not going to do is hurt me with me. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to use me against me and my truth against me. So
yeah,
it was almost like I'm on the best offense is a good defense, and or vice versa. So I would be like, and this is where I was, full disclosure. And
yeah,
it was like my attempt to sound like I'm just being honest with you and putting it up front, and like, being transparent, but in reality, I was getting it out there so that you couldn't come and surprise me with it later on. Yeah.
Well, there's a level of empowerment behind that too,
Right.
because just like you said, once you take somebody's ability to make you feel shameful for the shit that you did in the
It
past
loses ammunition.
away from them, and you take that card off the table, um,
But that was
at
still
that point,
that
there's
approach was
yeah,
still very shame based
it
because I
loses
am
all of its
ashamed
power.
of it
So, and
and I'm
yeah, it's
afraid of
empowering.
that shameful feeling. So I'm not going to let you do it to me. But what it's done since then is now it's like a source of
Yeah,
pride. Like, oh yeah, you saw that? Okay, cool. Here's what happened, and this is where I am now. I'm surprised that that's something that you need to talk about because look at everything. You know what I mean? Now it's kind of turned around on you. Like, why, you see, I understand concern. I do. Like, that would be
yeah.
a concern of mine
Why is
too
it
if
such
I
a
were
big
in your
deal?
position.
Yeah.
Let me explain it to you because maybe you'll see that this is actually a really good move for you because you have somebody with this tenacity. Because I'm proud of that.
Yeah, tenacity, it's resilience, it's the ability to overcome adversity, and the ability. I mean, you're automatically in that instance, you're a fighter. You were at rock bottom, and you pulled yourself back up and made something of your life. I think that's where, like, this whole background check thing for employment. I'll tell you, before I got into truck driving, and I've already told you, I was an operations manager for the better part of like 7 years. And so I started interviewing with other companies before I left that position and left that company. And obviously there was background checks. So obviously I'm talking to him, and I had my whole spiel. Like, it shows that I'm resilient. It shows that I'm a fighter. It shows that I can overcome adversity, pull myself out of the trenches, blah, blah, blah. People don't want to hear it. But in that time but I think mine was more so like what you were just saying, where it was basically shame based in the beginning, and I was trying to have a good defense, whereas now I just kind of I take it for what it is. Like, I'll put it out on a platter for you. I'm not shameful of it anymore. I don't give a fuck. If you don't like me, you don't like me. If you don't want me to work for your company, chances are I probably don't want to work for your fucking company anyway. But yeah, it's definitely empowering once you can put it in your back
I can
pocket
say
and
that
use it
like
as a
the best
tool
relationships,
instead of
friendships,
something
working
to
relationships that
hurt
I
you.
have with people are the ones where I don't hide the ugly parts about me. You never have like a really good, deep, intimate relationship with anyone
Yeah.
if you're just showing them the perfectionism of it. But also, like, I'm not afraid. Like, there's nothing that there was a company that was
Right.
vetting me to do brokering and to do recruiting because they're an asset based trucking company, and I was speaking to the owner of the company, and he owns like 9 different branches of that. So it's a big, older, established company, and the owner of it has a house down here in Florida. And he was wanting me to broker for him, but I'm under contract somewhere else, so it was like very limited what I could do. But I could do all the recruiting for him. So I was like, I'm traveling. I'm not going to be around all that much. I said, I have a recruiter also that can help you. If you have any questions, you can contact her. So while I'm traveling, he called me and I couldn't answer. And I think no, this wasn't Matt's. I traveled to North Carolina. This was a couple months ago. So he called me. He left a voicemail. I'm traveling. I don't call him back. He already knew this. I already warned him. So then he tried to call the recruiter, my recruiter. She wasn't available. He left a message for her. Then he tried to call me back again. When he tried to call me back again, it was the day that I was coming home, and I'm on a plane. So he left a voicemail again. He knew where I was under contract before, and it's on my voicemail. So he called that company and he was like, hey, we have a whole bunch of trucks, some of your brokered freight. Just calling and checking in. By the way, do you know Annique Lesage? And they're like, yeah, we do. She works with us. She's great. And he's like, yeah, she is. Do you know about blah, blah, blah? Like, rattling off my background. And they're like, we're going to let you talk to this person who is like one of the executive directors that I have a relationship with. So he calls, and he's not leaving a name. He's not saying who he is, but he talks to the executive director, and he was like, did you know about Annique Lesage and X, Y, and Z? And the executive director is like, yeah, we know. We sure do. And so they hang up. And the guy calls me, the executive director calls me, and he was like, "What do you know about this company?" And I'm like, "This is what we're doing. They're vetting me for this, this, and that." I told him I'm under contract. I have a recruiter that can work for him, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, "Oh, well, he just called up here and said blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Bet." So I called the guy back finally, and I'm like, "What's up? How are you?" And he was like, "Oh, great. I'm coming down to Florida this weekend. Wanted to know if I could take you out to dinner." "Yeah, okay. Sure. What do you have in mind?" And we like make arrangements, set a time, date, all that stuff. And then I'm like, "Hey, so it's really interesting. Somebody from your company called up to, the company that I broker for. So what do you know about that?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know anything about that." I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Like, why would somebody do that? And he's like, "I don't know." And I said, "Yeah, because you called me. It's just coincidental that you called me so many times while I was traveling, like I told you I would be. And then, somebody calls up there and says this stuff about me." And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I wonder who that could be." And I'm like, "Yeah, I can't imagine." It bothers me so much that like somebody from your company who has been trying to get a hold of me would call up there and throw mud at my name because they're not getting a call back. And there's a pause. And he goes, "Well, I didn't intend to throw mud on your name. I just didn't know if you weren't getting back to me because you were back in jail." And I'm like, that's the default, right?
Oh,
That's
okay.
your default.
Well,
That's what I am.
punch you in my gut when you
That's
punch
where
you in my gut, dickhead.
Right. I said,
Like,
"Tell you what, we're not going to have dinner on
throw some
Saturday."
fucking
And not
man.
only that, but any kind of business arrangement that we have is entirely off the table because I don't feel safe with you. And not only that, but I'm not the only person in my organization that has that kind of a background, and I need to protect them from people like you. I said, "So please do not contact anybody from my company ever again because we don't work with people like you." Do you know how good that felt to be able to say that? Because it's usually the other way around. We don't work with people. I don't work with people who I can't feel safe with being a human being that has human experience.
Yeah, that's fucking wild. I hate the human race just finds ways to amaze me more and more day by day. It's wild. But so, well, we're rolling up on 2 hours here. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on? I know. I just looked down at the time and I was like, "Oh, fuck." I think this is my longest podcast yet. So congratulations. No, it was interesting. If we could talk about anything else you want to talk about.
That right now I'm like,
is there anything you wanted to touch
on?
Or?
Of the trial to my kid back, but that's interesting. Right now I'm in the beauty pageant stage of it, where like we parade all the wonderful things about me, and then that's the tax of it. I think that is in this type of mindset that society and like the judicial system has. It's always going to be a hierarchy of parenting. So there's always going to be the one that is like good and then the one that's bad. And so this case is really great because my attorney is really presenting it like, we need to even this out. Like, this is not part of her sentence. Like, child custody shouldn't be a part of the sentence of the wrongdoing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Well, as far as I'll tell you, my current wife and her ex-husband, they co-parent beautifully. John, his name's John. John and I have a great relationship. They were like friends growing up through school, but Flynn has 3 parents. And anytime I get on these or talk with people who are going through custody hearings, so on and so forth, and there's the power parent, the parent that holds sole custody. Now, obviously, there's some instances where that's needed, but you've at this point proven there's no reason for there to be a 50-50 split when both parents are doing what they need to do. There's no reason that there shouldn't be a shared parenting agreement in place. Kids will thrive when they have 2, 3, 4 parents in their lives that love them, that are willing to take care of them. But once again, I think the court system's flawed. The judicial system's flawed. The court system's flawed. Like, the whole fucking government's flawed. But that's a whole other podcast.
every time I have a boyfriend, is this person, okay,
Oh yeah.
so my partners have to go through the ringer. You
Yeah.
know, my ex-husband basically used my affections, as a way for me to facilitate a relationship with my kids while I was away. Like that was a condition, me being nice to him and, giving him promises of being together, even when he had a girlfriend with him, with our kids, and then after. So, my
Yeah.
mental health evaluations from when I was being sentenced are being brought into court. And that's like well over 10 years ago. Like there's a lot of things that I have to prove that nobody else should have to. But I mean, on one hand, I accept it. Like this is part of accountability, but on the other hand, it's like, at what point is that ridiculous? Because I feel like a good part of me has been way more accountable than I need to be in this case. I didn't murder anybody. I didn't rape anybody. I wasn't selling drugs to kids. I wasn't abusing my
Yeah.
kids. I wasn't doing anything like that, and I've had to go through way more than people who have done those things had to do in order to get their kids back. And they have them, they have them, lost them, and then got them back again.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a crime's a crime. I get that, but I mean, even in my situation, I mean, I look at what you did, and like people like you and I, we can sit back and we can say one crime's. I mean, everybody can sit back and say one crime's worse than another. But I sit back and I look at what you did and versus what I did, and I'm like, the sentences 100% should have been flipped. Like, I served a total of like 2 years,
There were
and
women that were there were women
did
that
some
were
shit.
in there that
I
were
don't.
accused of the same things
So
as me
for
and
somebody to commit like that,
convicted of it, and they're doing 35, 40-year sentences. And that has a lot to do with restitution. So if they didn't think that I had the ability
Jesus,
to give money back, then I would be in there I would still be there. And but I'm home, I'm on probation, and the only thing that they care about is getting their pound of flesh and their money. And I don't have to do anything, except that. As long as
give
I'm
me my
doing, as
money.
long as I'm paying,
Yep.
then they'll leave me alone and I can leave them alone. But in reality, like, yes, I understand punishment has to fit the crime, white collar, blah, blah, blah. But the real thing is that if I didn't have the resources that I have, if I didn't have the privilege that I have, and if I didn't have the upbringing that I had, and I'll give those flowers where they're due, even though right now my mom is who she is and my family is who they are, then I would have gone into the prison system and turned out to be a completely different person. That is way worse. I can say that I went into the prison system really naive, really dumb, like really just, typical white woman Karen, driving around the SUV with her headpiece in and a cup of coffee, yelling at people for cutting her off, refined and strong. I'd always been pretty strong. I think I used that strength wrong, but now it's combined with that self-awareness. There are a lot of people that will go in just like me and come out not that great and knowing how to do other crimes. Now, like my dad passed away a year ago tomorrow. My family didn't even tell me that he died. Like I had to find out. My uncle's widow told me. I went to the funeral and nobody spoke to me. And this is the kind of environment that my kids are also a part of, where they have to choose back and forth. And it's really difficult because they're being raised in the same type of environment that I was, that turned me into the person that went into prison. And now I'm trying to balance it out with the person that I am outside of prison, because I like this person a lot better. And that picture that you had just put up of like my profile picture from TikTok, like that's who I am now. That was taken 6 months. That is a joyful, happy person. That is exactly who I am every single day. And one of my best friends took that picture. I would never have looked like that before I went to prison.
Yeah.
Because I was really limited by my own belief systems that were instilled in me. And by completely checking out of the people that were holding me back and thinking that they were helping me, but really holding me back and hurting me, by completely letting go of that, that's what I emerged into. And so I think that if what I want anybody who's listening to this, I think what I want them to take away is look at the things that are making you comfortable and see how that is actually hurting you. Because in that job, I was comfortable. In that job, I was, satisfied because I was being paid a lot. I had a lot of perks. I felt like I had a lot of responsibility, and that made me feel good. That made me feel important and wanted. But it hurt me. It hurt me in the long run. And those people who were helping me took off. And it's the same thing with my family. I thought they were helping me. I thought that they were, supporting me. I thought they were doing this, but it's very transactional. So if there are people who are listening to this and they're trying to figure out what the takeaway of the last 2 hours is, I think the big thing is really reevaluate what you think is supporting you and reevaluate what you think is benefiting you, and think 3 steps ahead to how that could hurt you, and definitely pivot and adjust. I learned a lot of lessons and I had a lot of takeaways, but I was smart. But if I was wise, if I had wisdom, I wouldn't have had to experience it in order to gain that. I would have just been observant and think 3 steps ahead. There are a lot of lessons that I learned that I didn't have to go through all of this in order to learn. It's part of my story and I'm proud of it. But if I had somebody tell me, to reevaluate the things that you think were benefiting you and see how they could be harmful, you can really change before, things get really bad.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think a lot of times, I think a lot of people only learn through experience though as well. You're 100% correct though. If the Chris now could go back 15 years and tell the Chris then how everything was going to pan out, like, or what he needed to stop, you're absolutely right. It's hard, man. Like I said, I don't regret anything that I did. I love who I've become today. I appreciate all the fires that I walked through, all the coals I stepped on, because just like you just said, it brought a level of spirituality. It brought a level of emotional maturity. It brought just strength in general, walking through those hard times. So I appreciate you. I think you have a great story. I think what you're doing is amazing. I need to do more yoga. I'm not going to lie, with my back. I am not as flexible as I once was, and my wife likes to make fun of me for it on a regular basis. But no, you have a great story, and unfortunately, you, along with me, along with anybody else that's got a felony on their record, you're going to continue to get smacked in the face with bullshit because of your past. And I appreciate everything you just said, because the whole point of this podcast is to kind of give some hope and let people know that there's a great life out there for you if you just push it and work for it. And I think you have put in the work the last 5 years. I think you have a very strong backbone now. You are present. You are doing your damn thing, and you've made a great life for yourself. So there's never
like
any amount of shame that should be put onto your past, because you're doing the damn thing.
Corrections officers and like what happens to people when they've been in the system, being treated that way, they just get worse. But then you have a resource like this where you talk about it without the shame and with a more compassionate, there's the compassion is the edge, not the shame. Nobody changes by being shamed. If they do, then it's for the worse. They change with compassion. They change with grace. They change with communication and light and honesty about it. So if I really want things to change, not just for me, but for other people who experience it, we have to take the shame component out of it and really talk about like how I benefited from other people's compassion, and for compassion with myself. Other people taught me how to be compassionate with myself, because I didn't know how to be, because I had all these other people that raised me telling me to be embarrassed and telling me to be ashamed and accept just this much because that's all you deserve, because you should be ashamed of what you did and where you've been. But then I have people like
Yeah.
my best friend, and I have, other people like you that are willing to share the ugly about life, and all the other people that I've attracted along the way in my community that are like, no, look at, you deserve love. Maybe if you had a little bit more, you wouldn't have been more susceptible. You would have, known to accept love off of a silver spoon instead of licking it off of a knife. And, that's how people change, not
Yeah.
through shaming them. So thank you for this.
Yeah, no, this was great. Like I said, I've wanted to have you on for a minute. I've talked to Andrew about it. I was super glad when it was almost, I could hear your eye roll through the phone. You were like, well, duh, I'll come on and do it. And, because Andrew kept saying, he was like, yeah, she'll totally do it. She'll do it. And I was like, I feel weird asking her, but no, I'm super glad you came on. I am extremely proud of you. I love talking to people who've done amazing things such as yourself. So keep doing it. Obviously, I'm still wanting to come over and do the whole brokering thing with you guys. So that will happen. Hopefully sooner than later. But no, I appreciate you. I think you're a great person. I love your story. And
listen, Mary and
yeah, I love you and Andrew, and I can't wait. We're still looking to come down hopefully the end of this year to go jump around Epcot with you guys. So okay. I will run around with Andrew all afternoon. I could give a shit less. So, all right, I will holler at you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Annique, I'll shoot you an email. This will probably get uploaded probably by end of the weekend. So I'll shoot you an email and with a link, and we'll go from there. Okay. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you. Bye.